What is truth? This question raised by Pilate when Jesus Christ stood trial before him exposed his own worldview. He lived in a world in which absolute truth did not exist. I think Pilate's voice was dismissive and filled with disdain. He was agitated at one point when Jesus failed to answer his questions. Though he looked straight into the face of the incarnate truth, he could not discern it. Today we will look at the account of the trial of Jesus from the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verses 28 through 40, and then we'll take a peek at Mark, chapter 15, verses 1 through 15. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is this your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "Are you a king then?" said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at a time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in purple robe and went up to him, and again, "Hail, King of the Jews!" they slapped at his face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officers saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to the law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have the power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at the palace known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of the preparation for the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. In Mark, very early in the morning, the chief priests, with the elders and teachers of the law and the whole Sanhedrin, made their plans. So they bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd, and Pilate released Barabbas instead. "Well, what shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." So wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed them over to be crucified. Notice, if you will, in John's account, the conversation between Jesus and Pilate. Jesus told Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." "Are you the king then?" Pilate asked. Jesus answered, "You say that I am. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. At this point, Pilate turned away from Jesus. Pilate, like many who hear the truth, turn away and will not accept it. He tried to dodge, and he tried to weave his way out of condemning an innocent man. He even washed his hands in public. Rome had many governors throughout its vast empire. Pilate is immortalized because of his encounters with Jesus. So it bears asking, who was really on trial, Jesus or Pilate? Pilate, like all of us, are pressed to make a decision. God the Father, Jesus, his Son, and the Holy Spirit are the source of truth. We all must decide, is the Bible real? Did Jesus heal the sick, restore sight to the blind, heal broken bones, or cast out demonic spirits? Hundreds of people witnessed these events. The religious leaders decided that Jesus was a false teacher and was guilty of blasphemy. They did not believe he was the Son of God. Pilate found out that neutrality is not an option. We either have the true record of Jesus' birth, ministry, sermons, prayers, trial, crucifixion, and his resurrection, or we have a complete fabrication. We have history, or we have nonsense. The most dangerous idea is that man does not need God, that we all are basically good, and we will use technology to make us immortal. What are you going to do with Jesus? He is waiting for your answer.